Hey all, I'm Lou, a Common Sense Patriot here, with a quick follow-up to our look at the Preamble to the U.S. Constitution. In that presentation, we saw that based on what our government was originally supposed to do and how it was supposed to spend we the people's money, they've gotten way off course. Our spending like the proverbial drunken sailor politicians are way out of line, and we need to quickly see here just what that looks like and where our ship is headed. Folks, we are rapidly approaching a U.S. debt of $28 trillion, and that debt grows at a rate of $1 million every 17 seconds. Politicians have borrowed money we do not have to fund myriad unauthorized special interest projects and groups, and to grant subsidies to failing businesses, and to ship uncountable fortunes overseas, etc., etc., etc. Which, by the way, is absolutely diametrically opposite of what the preamble of the Constitution, which is essentially the mission statement of the United States government, says it should do. Like many things, Thomas Jefferson had an opinion on that as well. Quote, "It is incumbent on every generation to pay its own debts as it goes, a principle which, if acted on, would save 1/2 of the wars of the world." End quote. Just imagine how much different our nation's financial position would be if the ruling class had been held accountable to spend our money only as the preamble had laid it out. We're adding debt at a rate of over $3.5 million a minute. That is absolutely unsustainable. And what part of unsustainable do politicians not understand? Our country is not in jeopardy of failing. It is not just that our ship might sink. It is guaranteed to fail, to sink, if the budget isn't balanced and the debt eliminated. Seriously, this ship is going to drill a hole in the rocky shore, traveling full speed ahead, if the wild party in the wheelhouse in D.C. isn't stopped. Is there anyone with an IQ over 3 that doesn't understand that? Now hear me loud and clear. This isn't a Republican or Democrat issue. This is a United States government issue. Both sides spend like Powerball winners, and they're not slowing down. They're picking up speed. Both sides are responsible. But interestingly, the left's answer is to tax more, where it seems that the right's answer is to borrow more. Well, who does the left want to tax more? They want to they will tax folks who have more. Those people who have more are generally the entrepreneurs, the small business owners, those who took a risk to achieve the American dream. So now let's go back to the debt increase of $1 million every 17 seconds that I mentioned in the presentation on the preamble, and take a closer look at the math. If our debt is rising that fast, it means that simply to stop building any more debt, and recognize I'm not talking about reducing a single dime of the almost $28 trillion in debt we already have. I'm just talking about stopping the debt from getting any higher. We need to tax Americans an additional $1.85 trillion a year. Make sure you cut that word additional. Interestingly, that is actually more than the $1.6 trillion in income taxes the 143 million U.S. taxpayers paid in, and I'm using 2017 for this. So just to have enough not to borrow anymore, assuming the spending doesn't go up, fat chance, and not reducing the 28 trillion in debt we already have, the government would need to more than double every taxpayer in America's income taxes. That would mean those 143 million taxpayers would each pay an additional $13,000 a year in income tax. So do you all have an extra 13 grand laying around every year? Over and above the tax you already pay? Yeah, right. So let's say the government agrees to only raise the taxes of the top 10% of those taxpayers. So that would be 14.3 million people would pay an additional $130,000 a year in tax. If you're at the bottom of that top 10%, you're making about $138,000 a year. So if they're going to rob it, if they're going to take it from the top 10%, then some of those top 10% folks would have to pay in tax close to double what their total income is in the first place. Is the fog starting to clear? Is the math starting to sink in? Is the absolute fact that our political class is living the lifestyles of the rich and famous while their unlawful spending of we the people's money is driving us into guaranteed economic destruction, is that becoming apparent to you? Our politicians are sinking our ship, folks. And we're just standing at the rails, looking into the water, creeping up the hole, and saying loudly, "Oh shit!" But talking is all we're doing. We've got to act, people. We must act. But if you think it's all okay because you don't have very much and all the money the politicians take from other folks in taxes and then turn around and buy your votes with by redistributing it to you in welfare checks and food stamps and cell phones and stimulus checks, it's cool with you, there's something very important you need to remember. When the Titanic hit that iceberg and sank, everyone left on the ship died. From John Jacob Astor, one of the wealthiest men in the world at the time, and Macy's co-owner, Isidore Straus, and his wife, to the poorest of the immigrants traveling in third class, and the lowest paid person working on the Titanic that trip, and every rat in the holds, they all drowned in that icy North Atlantic water. Some of the women and children got into the few lifeboats and survived. Think of them as the politicians who will scurry for the lifeboats when the water finally starts to swirl around their feet from the ever-rising flood of the debt America is accumulating. Many of the ruling class will probably abandon ship and land on their feet. You, my friends, the average Jack and Jill, will not land on your feet. And never forget, this special interest spending and borrowing and overtaxing was never part of our founders' intent. And yet, if we do nothing, it is exactly what will sink the USS America. Because if it continues, our posterity will be enslaved to the debt and taxation forever. Citizens of the United States, rich or poor, old or young, black or white, wake the flip up. Anyway, that's a short explanation of the reality that we're facing. I'm Lou, a common sense patriot. Godspeed.